the representative of the Honorable Minister of Youth Development, who is here. And thank you very much for your very kind words. The Mayor of Islington, the country representative of the UNODC, the Regional Africa Director, Center for International Private Enterprise, and the Chairman of ProShare, the Chair of Integrity, the Integrity Organization, Mrs. Ibukun Awoshika, members of the Board of Integrity, the co-founder of Integrity, Mr. Soji Apampa, the management and staff of the Integrity Organization. Let me say that it really is a pleasure to join you all today in celebrating 30 remarkable years of the Integrity Organization and the Convention on Business Integrity, CBI. Soji Apampa and I co-founded Integrity in 1995. We were both concerned at the time about the way corruption in both private and public lives, or private and public sector, continually damaged our economy and eroded the government's ability to render even the most basic services to people. Soji was particularly concerned about how private sector corruption damaged the reputation of Nigerian businesses and the very chilling effect that it had on investor confidence. We initially considered joining Transparency International at the time. Transparency International had been formed about 2 years before. But we found that we couldn't, it was better for us to work together rather than to join them, because they were focused on coalition building against corruption. But we wanted to address individual cases of corruption in both the public and private sector. We started at the time by publishing a single sheet, a pamphlet titled Scrutiny, where we detailed acts of official corruption. And we had a cartoon series titled Integrity Pays. The cartoon was simply, that cartoon series was simply to highlight the economic and social benefits of ethical conduct and integrity, both in private and public life. Nduka Obaigbena, the founder of This Day and publisher of This Day, then a relatively new newspaper, helped us to circulate Scrutiny every week by inserting it in the Thursday edition of the newspaper. So we're able to circulate our pamphlet through This Day newspaper. Later on, we drew up the Convention on Business Integrity, a document which we hoped and which we proposed would be signed by companies that were ready to pledge to observe the highest ethical standards in their businesses. We then hoped that this would create a body of businesses recognized for their commitment to integrity and high ethical standards. At some point, we approached Dr. Christopher Kolade to chair Integrity. He didn't know either of us. He had never really met either of us. But he liked the idea and then said to us that, because he really didn't know us, he said, well, you need to persuade 2 other people with whom he shared the same values and ideals. And those 2 people were Mr. Akintola Williams, now of blessed memory, the doyen of the accounting profession in Nigeria, and Mr. Michael Omolayole, the respected business, he was very well respected in business management and in governance, corporate governance, and generally in corporate Nigeria. We spoke to them both, and it appears that we made a reasonably good impression. Dr. Kolade then agreed to chair the organization, and both Mr. Akintola Williams and Mr. Omolayole continued in their roles as mentors. We're grateful, extremely grateful, for Dr. Kolade's exceptional and courageous leadership of the organization for 15 years, as our chairman has pointed out, our chairperson has pointed out. But let me particularly speak of Dr. Kolade's courage. Because, as you know, integrity always requires some courage. The organization was founded in the darkest days of the Abacha regime, when any form of dissent or criticism of government was treated as an existential threat to the government. At the public launch of the Convention on Business Integrity here at this Muson Center, the venue was surrounded by operatives of state security. And they informed us that the event could not proceed because it could give rise to a breakdown of law and order. Well, we said to them, Soji and I said to them that you have to speak to our chairman about that. You know, the head of the team, of this, the state security team, then told Dr. Kolade, took him to Dr. Kolade, and it said to Dr. Kolade that we will not be allowed to go ahead with the launching. And Dr. Kolade said to him, no way, we are going ahead, and we are doing nothing illegal, and you'll have to arrest me to prevent us from going ahead. We proceeded, and Dr. Kolade gave one of the most courageous speeches that I've ever heard, scolding the government for lack of transparency and accountability. Incidentally, that day, many of the companies that had committed to signing the pledge, when they saw the way things were, they just declined to sign the pledge. Many of them. Of course, they later on signed after the event. We still had to get everyone to come to terms with the idea that, well, I mean, it may be slightly risky, but many signed eventually. But that day, we had, I think it was only one company that eventually, and that was Cadbury, I believe it was, because that was the company that Dr. Kolade chaired at the time. Nobody else was prepared to sign. The role of the Ford Foundation in the growth of integrity is also very important. Ford Foundation heard about our work and wanted to support the work that we were doing, especially our work on the Citizens Report Card and on local government. We had a Citizens Report Card on local governments where we got citizens to tell us what they thought about the work of their local governments and all of that. And there were a whole series of reports that we published at the time. But there was a hitch. Ford Foundation wanted to help us, but there was a hitch. Integrity at the time was not incorporated. The government had refused our registration. So we were essentially an organization in name only. We had no legal status. And of course, the reason why we were not registered was because the government felt that this was a dissident group. Dr. Akwasi Aido, then the head of Ford West Africa, decided that they would issue the grant anyway. And they issued the grant in my name. They took the risk of giving us the grant check in my name. So we could very easily have run away with the money, and Soji and I would have built homes, I think, probably in Ikoyi or somewhere. But anyway, I think that we eventually justified their trust. We had yet another scrape, again with security operatives, when they raided our office at 34 McCarthy, looking for Soji and I. But they found our head of publications, Gwile Oshadipe, who was immediately taken into custody at 15 Awolowo Road. The only way to get him out was to submit, either myself or Soji would have to go there to the headquarters of the SSS. And eventually, I had to go. As a matter of fact, they had specifically asked for the professor, and I was the only professor in the place. But this Gwile Oshadipe looked like a professor. Wore glasses. I didn't even wear any glasses. So I'm sure they thought he was the professor, and they took him. So I was there for the entire day, I think till close to midnight or something. I was warned to go back to the university to teach what I was employed to do, rather than stir up people against the government. Anyway, Gwile and I were freed that day. 30 years have gone by, and the story of integrity continues. Commendable work has been done by the Convention on Business Integrity, and I'm sure we'll hear even more about that. But the fight against corruption seems to be still a huge struggle. We still live in a paradox. Corruption perceptions persist, yet Nigerian excellence is rewriting our global story. The paradox of a country with incredible talent, our doctors who are pioneering medical breakthroughs, our artists are defining culture across the world, our entrepreneurs are building billion-dollar companies, our athletes are breaking records, innovators are shaping technology side by side, all of this going side by side with a stubborn perception of systemic corruption. How do we resolve this paradox in favor of a country of global excellence where integrity is a cornerstone? Sometimes it seems that little has been achieved and that corruption in Nigeria is an intractable problem. But I'm convinced that it is not. Many countries have dealt with systemic corruption and won, many worse than Nigeria. We're no different. In any event, our survival as a nation may well depend on how we deal with corruption. It was Lee Kuan Yew, the celebrated Prime Minister of Singapore, who so aptly said that corruption is like the HIV virus. Once you contract it, it weakens the immune system. Every part of the body is compromised. Even a simple cold can kill. And this is what corruption means. The HIV of corruption weakens everything, from law enforcement to justice to procurement of any kind, and even the maintenance of the territorial integrity of Nigeria by the armed forces. Over the years, I've learned a few things about the fight against corruption. The first is that you need the full, unwavering commitment of the political leadership, beginning from the very top, at every level, president, governor, local government, and of course, ministers. But you must have the full and total commitment of the executive, and of course, all the other leaders, Senate President, etc. But I must say that it's not enough for the political leadership to just hate corruption, assuming they do, or know its legal consequences. There must be a single-minded commitment to eradicate it. The second point is that leadership must be prepared to exemplify the transparency and honesty that they want to see in public and private life. In other words, the leaders themselves must be persons who want to display in their private lives and public lives integrity. The third is that the executive must have a clear vision for what success in its anti-corruption program looks like, and must sit with the judiciary and legislature to share that vision and get their buy-in. The fourth is that an objective must be to ensure that everyone knows that there will be consequence, severe consequence for. The fifth is that the courts, our court system, must be equipped to deal with corruption quickly. Practice directions, these are directions issued by our courts, by judges, Chief Justice of Nigeria, Chief Justice must define how quickly and what way the courts must deal with cases of corruption. The sixth is that reducing the discretion of bureaucrats, especially with technology, is one of the most effective ways of preventing corruption. The seventh is that corruption is an economic crime. It is for the reason why people are corrupt. Usually, it's because they want to make money. And so, the process of ensuring that people, the process of reducing corruption means that you must also ensure that whatever a person is taken back, there must be restitution. There must be restitution for whatever it was. You cannot simply slap someone on the wrist after they've stolen money and say, we dismiss you, go away. Corruption in the public service is not impossible to overcome. And that's the honest truth. It is not. I'll very quickly share an experience. in Lagos State, where when I was Attorney General between 1997 and 2007, appointed by Dr. Bola Tinubu, now President Bola Tinubu, we undertook a major reform of the justice system, and we tackled the hydra of corruption in the judiciary. Before we were sworn into office, the then governor-elect had constituted the Justice Sector Policy Committee, amongst other sector to prepare a blueprint for the sector. The committee was headed by Chief Mrs. Priscilla Puye, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who was former president of the bar. There was also Mr. Ola Ode, Senior Advocate. And we conducted a survey. This was after the report of the committee presented on Gambia. We conducted a survey amongst 200 lawyers who are practicing in the Lagos High Court, who are practicing there, or who are practicing in the Lagos High Court. And one of the questions that we asked, amongst other questions, was what is your perception of the integrity of judges in Lagos State? 89% of them, 89% of the 200 lawyers that we interviewed said that they believe that judges in Lagos State were notoriously corrupt. Notoriously corrupt. So we had corrupt, very corrupt, notorious, 89% believe that judges at the time. It was 1999. They were notoriously corrupt. Yet, from 1967, when the state was founded, up until 1999, when we conducted this survey, no judge or magistrate had been reprimanded, not just warned for a corrupt act. None. So all their records were clean, while the perception of those who worked in the courts was that they were notoriously corrupt. Our reform approach then decided that we have to have an approach. As I said, we sat with the judiciary and the legislature. We all had to have it. My meeting with the judiciary, the 7 most senior judges of the judiciary at the time, was to even find out what exactly the problems were and what we needed to do. At the time, they were earning 7,000 naira. Now, 7,000 naira a month for a judge. Well, that's 7,000 naira. Was poor. Certainly not compared to 7,000 naira today, but was still very low. I asked the question as we sat round the table. Justice X, you have this fund in America. How much do you pay in school fees? And he would say $12,000. I'm all right with that. $12,000. How about the one at the University of Lagos? What's your general expense? 10,000. I'm all right with that. Then one of them tapped me. So I said, let it. You two know that this thing we're doing is rubbish. You know it's rubbish. You are pretending to pay us. What you were pretending to what? You know for sure. You know for sure. There is no way 67,000 can possibly send a child to university in the US. That's another one. So we decided that that's one big problem. Remuneration, we have to deal with that. Another judge gave an example. He said to me, he said, look, Prof, we're all sitting around the table. He said, my daughter fell sick one month. And my wife called me from home to say, I've taken the lady to our daughter to the hospital. I don't want to name the hospital. Somewhere on the island. And they have stabilized her. But they said that to admit her, you must pay them 50,000 naira. So I rushed there and pleaded with the management of the hospital to allow me to pay let me even pay a big amount of money and go back to the court, start, raise money and all that. So they refused. They said, no, we have stabilized her, but if we are going to admit her, you must pay 17,000. He said that while he was still talking to them there, the gentleman behind him came and said, look, don't worry, sir. I know how you do it. We'll pay the 17,000. I'll pay. He said it was as if an angel came from heaven And 17,000 naira was paid. He thought of it. That's why I was walking back to this car. His clerk, that of course, who was following him, said to him, "My lord, do you know the man who paid?" He said, "No, I've never met him before." He said, "The man was in our court last week." He said, "Lindsay, he was in our court last week." So the judge said to us, said, I had to make up my mind whether to run after the man and say, please, just don't, or let it all go. Said I chose my daughter's advice. I said, there's no way I'm going to ask anyone to find her. Okay, I don't know what to try. So it's evident to all of us that we needed to deal with some of the issues that conduce to corruption or that push people to corrupt activity. So anyway, cut a long story short, we decided on several different areas, three major areas. The appointment of judges. The process was made merit-based. We then started conducting competency tests to make sure that if you're going to be a judge, you must also be competent. We didn't allow a man no man situation. We just simply said, we are going to find the very best. We also required the Nigerian Bar Association at the time to provide character references for each judge. So if we nominate you as a judge, the Nigerian Bar Association would also tell us, the Lagos Bar must tell us, is this a person of integrity? Is this a person of competence? In 2001, we appointed 26 new judges from diverse backgrounds and fresh perspectives to the judiciary. The majority of them were very young people. The majority of them who were appointed at the time were very young, were bright, already in legal practice, in academia, or legal advisors before. 2/3 of them were female, 2/3 of them male, because we were under the impression that if you appoint females, they are more likely to, they are less likely to be corrupt than men. We were good, right. Extensive, extensive background checks conducted those were the judge. Remuneration, as I said, is important. And to address judges' complaints around compensation, we brought in human resource experts to assess what would be a living wage for judges. So their salaries were quadrupled, we raised their salaries by 4 times. Then we established a policy that every judge in Lagos State must be given a comfortable home, not official quarters. When you are appointed a judge, you give you a home, it is yours for life. You choose where you want the home. Whether it's the places where we have at the time, Lekki, Ikoyi, or Ikeda. They were also entitled to CAS, which was replaced every 4 years. Then discipline. We established an independent process for investigating corruption, with the National Judicial Council taking charge, avoiding local interference. In the first year of the reform, we had 22 magistrates for corrupt practices, 22. 3 judges were also sacked on the recommendation of the NJC, for which their cases have been referred. Simply referred, any case of corruption will simply refer to the NJC and voted for the recommendation. And we abided by whatever that recommendation was. By the year 2000, a follow-up survey was done on 200 lawyers in the state government in 1999. 0% lawyers at the time, but people in the judiciary still from 89. That's the report. The report of the reform, judicial sector reform in Lagos State is published by the World Bank. The World Bank published a report titled Repairing a Car While the Engine is Running. Repairing a car while the engine is running. The Lagos State Judicial Service report. That report is in the 2007 report. I think that the important thing, an important element of that is that we can it takes little. It takes without political will, even the judiciary cannot really report itself. When I say political will, I refer first and foremost to the executive. The executive must be able to report. The Lagos State Judiciary Reform is a small sector. There's no way of saying that necessarily answers the question of how to make bigger reform. But it's important just in terms of how the reform was carried out and why it was successful. Soji and I started integrity in our 30s. I was 38 at the time, and Soji was much younger. And of course, much more daring because he was a younger man. He didn't have this brain there. We believe that we could be that generation that would be the end of corruption in our nation. We really strongly held that view. But evidently, that is not the case. But the dream is still alive and perhaps even burns brighter today than when the organization was founded. And that paradox of the great country with a stubborn perception of corruption is not merely a contradiction. It is crossroads for us as a country. The reality of what is possible. And I believe that it is entirely possible. But much remains to be done. There's a lot that we must do. But the past 30 years have proved something important, that the work of integrity is not futile. It is foundational and catalytic. There must be innovation, creativity around building anti-corruption systems for the private and public sectors. And there must be constant reminders that integrity or lack of integrity will defeat the greatest dreams. So as we mark this 30-year milestone, I believe it's time to reaffirm a simple but powerful truth, that our country's destiny and the destinies of many of us and the businesses that we're on cannot be divorced from integrity. Our prosperity, our global standing, our security, our national cohesion all hinge on integrity. 30 years ago, integrity began as a bold idea by two young idealistic guys. Today, it stands as a testament to what perseverance, what conviction and courage can achieve. But the next 30 years will depend on all of us, our choices, our leadership, and our willingness to insist on a Nigeria where integrity is not the exception, but the norm. That work continues, and I believe the dream endures, and together we can build that Nigeria that our talent, our promise, and our future deserve. Thank you very much.